A part of me questioned if I should make this video because, in terms of involvement, I have only been a small part of the ongoing investigation on Zamboni's behaviors. However, Zamboni has often found ways to evade the consequences put upon them. It would be erroneous and irresponsible of me to not speak on the issue. The My Singing Monsters community has had a track record of allowing predatory people to lurk due to its majority of impressionable children who are mentally incapable of discerning when they are being taken advantage of. I've been one of those people, and it's my due diligence to not repeat the cycle of ignorance and manipulation this fandom continues to perpetuate. I will preface that some of the instances recalled by both ends lack physical evidence to back them up, therefore I will refrain from relying on these statements until physical evidence comes and I can properly analyze it. Until then, my arguments will be based on the physical evidence gathered from the investigation of my peers and information taken from reputable sources. If there is a lapse in my judgment on these events, I encourage you all to correct me. Otherwise, I will try to include all the evidence I am backing my arguments in the video. In this video, I will clarify the whole extent of the allegations against Mr. Zamboni from Mantis Girl and analyze his response. On September 22nd of 2022, Mantis Girl created a tweet shortly after the public became aware of her questionable behaviors. At the time of the creation of the post, Mantis was 17 years of age. In the thread, she displays screenshots she states are evidence of Mr. Zamboni posting lolicon content in the Dubiously Lick channel. This isn't stating that they did post it on Dubiously Lick, but it was stating that lolicon has been posted by Zamboni, allegedly on Pixief on the date of the screenshot. In the second post of the thread, Mantis alleges they were put into many situations where they had interacted with others wherein SFW was involved whilst they were 17 and younger. Skipping to the fourth post of the thread, she fully accuses Zamboni of grooming her. She claims Zamboni took in part of consuming lolicon to the extent that it blurred into her content, i.e. her monster having ties with lolly nomenclature. Generally, whilst screenshots are thin, the thread is Mantis not denying she has an attraction towards lolicon, but that she had garnered the interest through outside means that involve Zamboni. This has been corroborated by Shimmy and Vani, and these corroborations are supported by Vani being in the screenshot of the second post of the thread in dubious_licks and, anecdotally, Shimmy being in servers holding Zamboni and Mantis. I am of the belief that her allegations hold merit as well, and I will now prove and argue that merit. Now, it is time to discuss and analyze Zamboni's retort to the allegations. As we go along, I will be using evidence from three sources. The first is the screenshots detailed in the callout document by Monsters Fire 24 on June 1st of this year. The second is a document I made to warn Zamboni of their behavior that I sent to them on March 8th of 2021 and the video I took of the interaction we had when I had shown them the warning. Thirdly is evidence from reputable sources and my own arguments against some of their statements. As previously stated, if there is a lapse in my judgment on these events, I encourage you all to correct me. Let's get going.
So, recently a video was released that supposedly portrayed me in a string of pretty bad and unredeemable events in an effort to expose problematic tendencies that I have. Obviously, this isn't the first time someone's tried to do this, and I highly doubt it'll be the last time either. But just like the other times, the content in that video are tenuously related to me at best, and flat out untrue at worst. In this video, I am going to be going over the full history of the events from my side of the story, in an attempt to shed some further light on what happened.
We see here that Zamboni continuously hesitates to state what exactly they have been accused of, what video they are rebutting against, and what events they are referring to that they have been accused of prior. They do discuss this later in the video, but I argue that the clear avoidance of crucial details in the assumed introduction of the video is intentionally misleading. While it can be assumed that most of the people watching had watched Mantis's video previously, unlike Zamboni, it is vital that in any introduction one clearly states what they are arguing against in detail for the audience to know what is being disproved and that you are aware fully what you have been accused of.
This is not an attack on the accuser. I don't really feel like anyone is at fault, to be honest, and I try not to judge people too harshly. Without further ado, though, let's get to the bottom line. Now, to start at the beginning of this whole situation, I can actually use the website linked in the original video to go more in depth as to why what happened was not what people are saying it is. And in order to do so, I must also answer questions that have largely remained not touched upon. On the site, the first step mentioned for predatory behavior is victim selection, which brings us to this. Why was that server created in the first place? What you may not know is that this server was not my idea, but rather a reaction to an original owner's actions. You see, originally there was a group chat that already had Mantis in it long before I was added. It was run by a third party who I won't name since I don't want to drag people into it, not necessarily, but what ended up happening was I was added to that server because it was dying and people thought I'd make it more active. Now, yes, the server was NSFW in nature and that may be bad for some people, but trust me, I was far from the only person in my age group there, and far from the first one at that.
In this segment, we see Zamboni argue against the accusation that they had intentionally selected Mantis for grooming. They argue this by stating they were not the ones who had created the space where they had allegedly initiated the grooming, therefore they were not guilty of introducing Mantis to an NSFW environment. Merit can be held that guilt should also be displayed on the individual or individuals who allowed Mantis into a server with NSFW content, those of whom Zamboni is unwilling to name. Zamboni very blatantly deflects the concern that Mantis, who was presumably 16 at the time, was allowed in a server of those within Zamboni's age range, that being around 21, at the time. Keep this in mind.
It was a good server in my eyes. It let people be themselves for the most part, but we'll get to that in a bit. And people enjoyed it well enough. Then one day a ton of internal affairs went down and the owner pretty much soft deleted it, leaving everyone else upset and angry since it was pretty out of nowhere. In reaction to this, I made a new server, at first out of spite for the original being deleted, but also because I genuinely had fun in the old server and wanted it to stay. That is how the server I was in charge of got created, stripped down a bit as to not drag their names in unneedingly. When I created the server, I wanted it to be better than the last one, so I changed one thing. I added a rule that basically said no judgment allowed. Now, when people hear this, it's always used in the context of the topic I'm blamed for, that being lolly and guru topics. However, the real reason I created the rule was far broader. With the old server, one thing you weren't allowed to talk about without getting bad faith reactions was hermaphroditism, or futanari, or any variation of the idea. People thought it was stupid to not be allowed to post stuff like that, so I wanted to stop something like that from happening in the future. Yeah, I didn't make the rule to allow lolly stuff. It was for a lot of things at once.
Here, Zamboni admits to the creation of an NSFW server that he aimed to be no judgment, and by doing so allowed any topics to come forth, even including said guru and lolican. This is an admission of negligence on their part. They were still responsible for making a space where lolican would be a topic around Mantis. Assuming Mantis was invited, Zamboni is partially and potentially responsible for allowing Mantis's exposure to lolican content.
Now, the next step on the website is gaining access and isolating victims. And there isn't much I need to say about this step because here's what happened. After I created the server, I sent a message in the old one before it was deleted saying that if anyone wanted to join the new one I made, DM me. I never asked anyone to join. They had to ask me. Not only that, but I wouldn't have accepted anyone under 16, since 16 is the AOC in my province, and everyone who joined the server was 16 or older without exception. Mantis was one of the later people who joined the server, and there was no private chats she had access to, meaning there was no isolation happening at all.
This part here I find the most infuriating because Zamboni never explains further how mentioning the history behind the NSFW server they made was proof against the notion that they selected Mantis specifically for grooming. The argument as a whole stated here reeks of victim blaming and deflection. You will find in many instances both on Twitter and this video that Zamboni presses that the age of consent is 16 where they are and where Mantis is. However, what Zamboni neglects to realize, considering they live in Canada, is that there are limitations to such a law. For example, as stated by Ontario's Women's Justice Network, these peer group exceptions mean that if teens under 16 years old are close in age, they can legally agree to sexual activity with each other, including things like sexting. But, if a teenager under 16 is participating in sexual activity with a person who is older than their peer group/close in age group, it is considered a criminal offense. It does not matter if the teen gave their permission because the consent is not considered legally valid. Aside from the moral argument considered, Zamboni's use of legality as an argument here is flawed as well, so if Zamboni was sexting, which includes exposing pornographic images with Mantis at the time, their actions would still be considered criminal. Even in the video taken of my encounter with Zamboni, they explicitly acknowledge the immorality of their history with sexually joking with minors. It is stated by Zamboni that Mantis was not invited to private NSFW chats on the server. However, through my own experience around the two in 2021, I argue otherwise. In May of 2021, I was in a server Zamboni and Mantis shared, and according to a screenshot, Mantis was, in fact, in a private, or at least role-required NSFW channel, while a 15 with Zamboni called NSFW_chat and Fuda_squad. During that time I had gathered screenshots of Zamboni and two censored individuals who were assumed to be 16 promoting Mantis, under the name Ryan Guy, to draw NSFW in these channels. Zamboni, same as another individual who was at the time around 16 as well, or even younger. So while Zamboni may have not engaged in NSFW activity with Mantis on their own server, they certainly did on other servers.
Now, the next step in the list is trust development and keeping secrets, and this is where things are going to get a little complicated since it's very emotionally based, meaning I can't in good faith really say I'm clear objectively since it all comes down to how Mantis felt. I can say that there was obviously a mutual trust in the server in general. Everyone was free to post what they wanted and nobody really got upset, at least to my knowledge. There was a chat for any possible interest you could have, a lot of niche fetish stuff that I don't really want to go into because kids may watch this video, but it had a little something for everyone. Now, here's something I don't believe has been stated yet, and that is the origin of the problem chat, or as our server called it, Dubious Lick. It was originally called Dubiously Moral, but it was around the time that Dubious Lick meme happened, so it was renamed by a server member as a joke, and it just kind of stuck. It wasn't there originally. Want to know who asked for it to be made? Mantis.
Zamboni has been capable of interacting in NSFW channels with Mantis as seen in a plethora of screenshots on the Monsters Effort document. This document shows Zamboni sharing lolicon between DMs with someone, and one where they mention making it in, quite possibly, the Fuda Squad NSFW channel. Regardless of whether Mantis is somehow magically capable of consenting to exposure to content like that because the law says she can, Zamboni still certainly has sexually interacted, even if they're asexual, or even exposed Mantis to sexual content outside of Dubious Licks. Mantis was known for being close to Zamboni at the time, and Zamboni, as they have stated, has gained notoriety for consuming lolicon because they're a devil's advocate. Why would the public not suspect her involvement in this harmful exposure?
One of the first things Mantis asked for when she joined the server was a chat for gore, and I didn't really want to name a chat just gore, so I called it Dubiously Moral and decided it'd be a blanket category for any pornographic material that may be considered extremely taboo and immoral by a general public.
Here, Zamboni outright states once again that they created and allowed Mantis a space to be allowed exposure to Guro content. They may have not been the one who actively gave them images of Guro content, but they allowed it to happen and are therefore should be held responsible for that. Also, didn't you tell me you wouldn't allow minors in NSFW chats on your server in 2021? If that's the case, then why is Mantis in Dubious_Lick during 2022, an NSFW channel? Thanks for lying.
Now, so far, I think I've done a good job explaining what happened without really getting any of my personal feelings and biases involved, I like to believe. But going forward with the last 2 points on the website, it'll be a bit more difficult since it all comes down to what actually ended up happening now that the server was created. The next step on the website is desensitization to touch, and discussion of sexual topics. Now obviously, this one is very self-explanatory. I couldn't have really touched anyone since it was over the internet.
Mantis literally states this in her video. She is not claiming that you did that.
And the entire point of the server was to discuss sexual topics, so to pin that on me exclusively seems a bit unfair, if you ask me.
Pin it on you makes absolute sense considering you were the one who made a no-boundaries NSFW server, and actively invited an impressionable 16-year-old in there while you were 21, making channels where they were enabled to exercise these paraphilias. Why would you even surround yourself with 16-year-olds in an NSFW space anyways? She was 6 years younger than you. 6 years. In what possible way could a 21-year-old find anything sexually relatable in a 16-year-old?
This is the only step that has something actually true about my actions, though, and that is the previously mentioned discussion of sexual topics. I didn't interact a lot outside of my own corner of the server, but I did make an effort to make other channels feel active and welcome. Maybe it was a misguided action of me. I wasn't trying to encourage people, I was just trying to make them not feel ashamed of who they were. I don't really have a lot to say about this step since, again, it really all is explained in the title.
Here, Zamboni outright admits to interacting in those channels. Without sufficient screenshot evidence of their making people feel less ashamed, we won't know the extent of what they talked about or did, but going by the Futa Squad and NSFW chat screenshots as a possible example, that is absolutely encouraging NSFW topics and behaviors.
The last step is the big one, the one that is really the make or break for the whole thing. Attempts by the abuser to make their behavior seem natural. A lot of people claim I normalized a lot of problematic behaviors that Mantis began to exhibit, but here's the thing. In the whole history of the server, I talked in dubious slick a total of 5 times.
I could believe this if there were screenshots, which unfortunately there is none here. But this doesn't negate the possibility, or, in fact, truth that Zamboni has encouraged NSFW behaviors with Mantis.
Once was to post an image I found on Tumblr like 5 years ago I thought was really artistic. Twice was because people were being rude. And once was to relate something said back to something I like personally. And once just saying I drew an image but I wasn't going to post it outside of Pixiv. I never sent any images after the original piece of art I found. I never sent any underage characters at all. And overall, I never interacted in that chat outside of those instances. Why? It all has to do with one of my other friends. Now, I asked them if I could mention them, and they said they'd rather remain anonymous, but said I could still talk about the issue. They have a very bad history, and words like lolly can be triggering to them, so ever since like 2020, I've made an extreme effort not to say it. I hate typing it, I hate verbally saying it, I don't like using the word outside of very specific group chat.
Artistic in what way? What's the image? Ones without Mantis? How does you not using the word defend you from the allegation that you exposed Mantis to Lolican? You could still send images of it in private or outside your server.
That's because I don't want to upset this friend. And the entire history of the server, that word was said around 65.
Why so? Was it perhaps you allowed Lolican in a server where Mantis was in it and you willingly let Mantis see it?
Times when I last checked before it was deleted. And in those 65 times it was said, I said it about 3 times.
Why would you delete the server if you did nothing wrong? How could you get these numbers and the context of the messages if the server was gone? What was the context of you saying the word Lolican?
And this is where all this complaint being thrown at me just confuses me. I still don't understand it. Everyone keeps saying I normalized these actions and that I was encouraging Mantis's behavior, but in reality I barely even knew what was going on.
If I am to believe this, then that is negligence on your part.
I had no stakes at all in that chat, and that's just a fact. Those were the 5 steps outlined by the website, and for all of them, the only thing that was true about my actions in relation to it was 1 line of text in the 4th step, because that was the whole point of the server.
So, your whole point of the server was to allow pornography and discussion of sexual topics among those as young as 16? Literally 6 years younger than you? Do you hear yourself?
Another thing I want to mention is I think it's really odd how in the initial Twitter call-out, Mantis literally posted a screenshot of our DMs of me saying I had no memory of anything Mantis said I did. I have no idea what she was trying to prove with that, but it kind of just reinforces my position since that screenshot was obviously dated before I was even under fire. Lastly, I want to mention the whole call thing. Mantis keeps insisting that I was only really available through porn calls, which isn't really true. Now, I did call in that server a lot, and I did it all the fucking time. That part is true. But what isn't true is the idea that Mantis actually joined them. Mantis never fucking joined those calls. And when she did, she was only there for like 2 minutes. Sorry, but I gotta be harsh with that because it's just a total lie. Not a lie, but just not true. I don't want to devalue what Mantis is going through.
Yet you have by consistently blaming her for being in NSFW spaces when you were the one who allowed her into them. Not all of them, but certainly one of them.
Everyone treated her pretty poorly when everything came out initially, but that's just my personal opinion. I really try not to judge.
It's funny you say that because you were dead silent except for a "I'd what to say" tweet when it happened instead of defending her from the poor reactions she got.
I don't hate Mantis or anyone who has since turned their backs on me. It's the smart thing to do considering my position. What I do hate is the deflection of everything that happened onto my hands.
Doesn't sound awfully caring to me. It's easy because you make it easy. You actively play down the horrific shit you have done by manipulating people and have publicly let everyone know you have no consideration of boundaries around those more vulnerable than you, and you're proving that once again as we speak.
I get it. I really do. It's easy to blame me because I'm old and have a history of reputations being weird. It pretty much takes all blame off of you, and without much effort at all.
Are you going to tell us how this is Mantis's fault that a person 6 years older than her allowed her into NSFW servers and encouraged her to draw porn in some instances? Or do you realize how batshit insane that sounds?
It's just not true at all. I'm really being blamed for pretty much nothing, and I hope I've shown you all of that.
Zamboni's video for the uninformed and unwitting can easily have its malice underplayed. While at the very least I haven't seen many of their young fans fall into the blatant lies and manipulation, intentional or not, I have seen instances of Zamboni's warping of the situation bleed into Mantis's Twitter. I have seen people capable of due judgment and yet are persistent on downplaying Mantis's struggles through passive-aggressive victim blaming and the extremely perverse logic Zamboni has peddled for years by now. But if we were to humor these arguments just for once, there are still fundamental flaws, the biggest of which is an overall unwillingness of ownership. Zamboni believes their nature exumes them of consequence when this is far from the case. As mentioned before, the age of consent of their respective places of origin does not apply here as Zamboni is not considered of the peer group of Mantis age-wise. That argument is moot. Zamboni's recurrent "I am asexual" argument also holds little merit because the intention does not devalue the harm done. And that is a major point of the issue here. While intention should be considered, it is considered to cater to the necessary consequences involved rather than weighing if there should be a consequence or not. If we continue to play along with Zamboni's supposed intentions, those which I say should be questioned, considering a track record of dishonesty and clear two-facedness, then Zamboni would still be put to the stake here. Zamboni still allowed and enabled indecent and harmful exposure to someone 6 years younger and very openly emotionally vulnerable, and as screenshots just now revealed show, acted indecently with said minor. And actions like that, especially ones who have been seen as far back as a year ago, 2 even, deserve a consequence. Zamboni made the intuition to own that their actions, the first time they were called out, had at least potential of harm. They would be more careful, as they stated in our interactions, but, as we know, that's a lie. Then maybe, we could give them a chance to improve. But Zamboni has shown in every instance a lack of willingness to change because they simply do not want to. Zamboni doesn't think it's wrong for a 22-year-old to interact in inherently NSFW environments with a 17-year-old so long as it's legal. Zamboni doesn't see how sexualizing children or children being put in exploitative situations in the media is wrong because it's legal. They're not real kids, sure, but what is the logic behind that? Zamboni, if you got this far, tell us. Why is it okay for Lolican to exist? Why do you think it's okay for you to allow a 16-year-old into chats where their behaviors as a child and physiology are sexualized and allow the exposing of said 16-year-old to gore? Why would you surround yourself with people significantly younger than you but refuse to protect them so long as it benefits you? Why did you lie to me, despite how naively forgiving I was to you those years ago? I want to hear your full opinion, not your legal one. Because we're really, really curious. So to wrap up, I do want to state the reason as to why I didn't have these screenshots come out prior. Simply put, I absolutely forgot about it until I resurfaced the conversation video. I haven't been in the community for some time and only heard about Zamboni again during the call out by Monster Zephyr. Regardless, I do wish I posted all of the screenshots when I could. Then again, it probably would have been dismissed if it weren't for the details known by the public now thanks to the honorable actions of Mantis and others like her. I do wish at the very least that by making this video not only do I validate their experiences, because they are valid, but let others know that as well. Zamboni's reign of manipulation and creepy shit is over and I hope I will never have to talk about them like this again.